Warm welcome to everyone today. Elaine has just started the recording, so as usual, this will be available online for anyone who wants to go back and revisit. And it forms a good record, but we do keep, as you're about to see, a formal minute of the meeting. Got a couple of apologies this morning. Becky Metcalf was unable to join us, and we have Paul Ryan online as her proxy, and likewise Ian McMillan. We welcome Alison Ann Dowling as Ian's proxy. So good morning. Thank you for the wave. I don't think we have any other apologies to note this morning. So with that, we can just move on to the agenda. So first of all, can I just check, are there any declarations of interest or any transparency statements that we should be aware of this morning? Shakes of heads and no hands up, so we'll take that as confirmation. Excellent. So we can move on to the minute of the previous meeting. So that was the meeting held on the 28th of November last year. I'll just pause if there are any comments or any factual inaccuracies that we need to pick up on the minute. Otherwise, we'll take that as approval. No hands and no comments, so thank you. We'll take that as an approved minute of the previous meeting. Thank you very much. So it takes us to item 2 of the agenda. Now, this, you might recall from our previous meeting, we're trying to bring alive a little bit of some of the services that are core to what we're here to oversee and through our governance processes, but actually nothing brings it alive more than seeing what people's feedback is. So this is another example of that, and thank you very much to the comms team. I'm looking to my left to John and the team for working with us to get these examples. So at this point I will pause and hand over, who am I looking at? Pauline, thank you. You're going to introduce. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So we have a patient experience video to share from Anne, who experienced a relatively new hospital at home service, which members will recall has only just come into operational on the end of May last year, and to date we've had 114 patients that have been cared for through that service. And I suppose the outcomes for all of those patients have been really, really positive, and we've received some very nice unsolicited feedback from those patients. Importantly, for the whole system and the flow, we have saved over 700 bed days by doing this, and we're very keen that this programme continues and indeed expands. And you'll see within the Chief Officer's report, we note that we're we're collaborating with East Renfrewshire to increase our beds over the next 6 months up to 18 beds as part of the operational delivery plan for NHSGC. So our hospital at home service is based on a frailty pathway and very much around older adults and their presentation with exacerbations of many different conditions, but they do present with an underlying frailty diagnosis. We can see people with very serious infections and care for them at home. We can see people with functional declines that have suffered falls, and also we've had people through with heart failure and very complex medical problems. The team work obviously very closely with our consultant geriatricians and within the RAH. And we look not only to turn people round from the front door, because currently our referrals are very much enclosed within the RAH, but we also can bring people home from hospital a lot earlier than their stay the stay would normally have, should that service not be there. So it gives lots of opportunities to really test this model, embeds in relationships as we develop our staff and develop our service, because you'll understand that there's lots of things to consider around that. So Anne was admitted to the service just before Christmas following a fall. She was in hospital for a few days, and it was likely that stay would have continued should we not have had a hospital at home service where we could bring her home and continue that treatment and that overview and allow titration of medication and everything else that would normally happen in a ward to happen at home. So I'll pass over because hopefully you'll get a flavour of how Anne experienced that. Thanks.
I'm Anne, and I was taken into hospital out of the blue early hours of the 23rd of December, having fallen out of my bed, fast asleep, sound asleep, and what wakened me was a thud landing on my back and the carpet in the bedroom. Well, I couldn't move, absolutely couldn't move, but I always have my alarm on, and I thought, okay, I'll press it, which was wonderful. They phoned back, couldn't reach the phone. I pressed it again. I pressed it 3 times, and I still couldn't get to the phone. So I think by that time they realised I was still there, but couldn't get to the phone. So it was one of those kind of situations. So I gave up. And the next thing I knew, must have been a little while, because the next thing I knew, I'm looking at feet, 2 feet. And I thought, oh. And the voice said, it's David. Now I have a son, David. I said, oh, I have a son, David. He said, it is David. And it all went from there because they got the ambulance and I was taken into that age. And that was it. I was in for almost 4 days before I got home. But it's been an experience, let's put it that way. I wouldn't want to repeat. It's just excruciating pain. But oh, they've been wonderful. IH as well, no doubt about that. But this new service you've got started up, amazing. Absolutely amazing. I mean, I have been praising it to the family and to anyone who would want to listen because I think it's amazing. I got the option because the consultant came and said this isn't going to be weeks, it will be months. I thought, okay, well, that was a bit of a shock, and because up until then I'd been really active. Although the family don't think I've just been as active, but in my mind, I have been quite active, and I mean I keep the house going and everything else, so it's not as if I've got help coming in. They probably wouldn't do it to please me anyway, so I mean it's better doing it on my own. So anyway, apart from that, and they came round and said, I want to ask you a question. I said, oh, obviously, what's the question? And they explained, we've got this new setup going. I didn't realise it was just as new at that point. He said, now, you could get home to your own house with the same facilities that you have here. Oh, I said, well, I prefer to go home. So we got home. Having said that, I didn't realise at that point that I would be not so active as I've been, let's put it that way. Oh, I've been well looked after. They've been amazing. And I can't say enough because when I was asked if I would do this, I did say to Graham, I said, well, Graham, anything I say is that actually I've been saying it since the day I was taken in because I couldn't believe this was all happening. I mean, it's at a local hospital and you just think, oh, well, you go there and that's it. But really, to have started something like this, I think is amazing. And it's giving up beds.
It's a fantastic video. I love that actually. And there were smiles round, and I bet all the smiles were because we all have Anns in our family one way or another. So very relatable. I can think of lots of personal situations that really resonates with. So I guess we're not taking questions on that. That's just to give you a sense of it is a new service. Feedback is really, I guess, take away anything. People want to get home, don't they? That's the message loud and clear. People want to be in their own comfortable home or a homely setting. So really the main thing I want to do is thank Anne and make sure that we've fed that back to her, that we're really grateful for her agreeing to do that and just being so candid with us. So thank you. Thanks, Pauline. Thanks, John. Onto the proper agenda. It's more dull after this. I'm sorry, Niamh. It really is in comparison to hearing from Anne. So we've got an update in membership. So Niamh, I'll hang to you for that.
Thank you. Yes, a difficult act to follow. This is a pretty straightforward report that's just notifying everybody that Mark Halliwell is here today as a proxy for Willie Payton, who's the carers representative. So that's really all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So just a welcome. Mark's well known to us, and it's great that we've got that knowledge staying within the IJB. If Willie's unable to attend, that's good that you know us all well. So nice to see you today, Mark. And I spoke to you earlier, but you're here in an observing capacity, but welcome anyway. That takes us on to you, Billy, the Chief Officer's report. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Morning, everyone. And as you say, how do you follow Anne? So apologies before I start. It'll not be quite as entertaining or light-hearted as Anne's. So first thing I wanted to highlight, the report's there and taken as read, but a few things that I wanted to highlight. First on there is really around Pauline and Fiona, who are in the room. Just wanted to formally congratulate them in being permanently appointed to their respective roles since we were last in the IJB. So welcome and congratulations both. The next point, 5.1, Chief Officer site visits. So I've now got probably around 90% of our teams. I have to say I've got an awful lot out of those conversations. Lots of really, really good work going on, really dedicated teams, some of which are working in really challenging circumstances, as we can imagine. And so that's been a really valuable experience over the last few months. In terms of winter planning, there have been some what have been termed system resets. So that is where our teams are working really closely with acute colleagues to identify people a bit like Anne, who are in hospital, who could be supported in a different way, and to try and reduce the number of people in hospital beds over that critical winter period where we know that occupancy is really high. And again, the teams have worked really hard and done some fantastic work over that time. So the volume of work that's been done over just before the Christmas period and then just in the last fortnight has been really significant and has really helped in terms of reducing that pressure on the unscheduled care system and make sure people get to where they need to. Care at home inspection at 8.1. So congratulations to the care at home team who got very goods across their inspection. A lot of hard work. When I went and visited the team there, it was really obvious that the team have put a lot of effort into really improving their systems and processes and the work that team do. So great to see that being recognised in the inspection. We've talked about the hospital at home, so we've heard more about that, so I'll not go into that one. The only other thing I wanted to really highlight was the extension of the voting rights. So that voting rights now being extended to third sector and carers representatives. At the moment, there's detail that we need to work through in terms of what that looks like and what the implications are. So we'll be working with national colleagues to work up what that detail looks like, provide feedback and make sure that that works and that our members locally are supported in that new role. And then just a couple of other things under section 15 and 18. So that is around the audit and then the COSLA Scottish budget update. I suppose both of those really just highlighting what we already know locally, which is it's a really challenging financial environment and really emphasising the need for us to do the sort of transformational change that we know that we're working on locally in Renfrewshire. But happy to take any questions on any of those highlights or anything else in the report.
Thanks, Billy. We've got a couple of hands up already, so I'll come to Lisa Marie first. Lisa.
Thanks, Max. So I've got a couple of questions and a couple of comments and a bit of a request. First of all, Billy, if you've managed to get around about 90% of the teams, well done. I don't think people really understand how broad the services that we deliver are and how many teams that is. So that's excellent. I wanted to comment on the inspection of the care at home services. As having ran a small team in a past life, I don't think most people are aware of the complexity of delivering those services and delivering them well, and it's a really excellent result for them. So I want to say well done to all of the teams delivering them and the senior team, but also the people that we deliver the services for, because them working with us helps us to deliver the best services. And finally, the winter planning system reset. This sounds like a really proactive model, but also adapting to changes all the time, and services have always done that. But this does seem like a different way of working than what we've done in the past. So I request that when we get through the winter period and we understand a bit more about what we've done, that we get a bit of a fuller update on that. I'm thinking in summertime when you've got through the harshness of having had to deal with the winter. But I would really like an update on that, because it does seem like quite a big change in how we do things, and I think it would be positive for us to see the learnings from that.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa Marie. I agree. I think that will be quite important to get the learning from that, because the idea is not that we just keep repeating system resets, that we take the learning from it and we embed that in the normal practices. So that absolutely will come back. Thank you. Come to Alan next. Morning, Alan.
Hi, Max. Thank you. It was really just to make comment, Billy, on the extension to voters' rights, voting rights, which I think I think you've explained really well, that we're very much in a position where, although the extension is being offered up, there's a whole lot of work to be done in relation to the potential of support for people who would then have that responsibility. So I think it'd be remiss of me just to sort of not note for the minute that at a national level, from the third sector interfaces point of view, this is really welcome, but we echo your comments in that there is a level of risk there that has to be bottomed out so that people understand it and the areas of responsibility. But it is welcomed, but hopefully we can work through it in a way that helps people who take on that role to really work in partnership with health and social care and find themselves in a position where they feel the influence is worthwhile. And as I say, that the risk is kind of bottomed out. So thanks, Billy.
Yeah, I think that's well summarised, Alan. I could see nods around the room as well, that you know, that support needs to be there, just to make sure that everyone is comfortable with the changes and in agreement. So I've got Jamie and then Jennifer. Thank you. Jamie, morning.
Hello. That's a really good thing on the care at home inspection, and I loved that video on hospital at home. I heard last week as well input from other people who had used hospital at home around maternity care, and I found it really interesting to hear that that's really helpful, because very few people just have one child, and actually that whole process can be incredibly demanding in terms of childcare, and having hospital at home was really helpful for just allowing families to continue normally as well. So that was great. I do have so on the extension of voter rights thing, I am aware that I am not asking questions to people who know any answers whatsoever. There is a pace to this that means that we're throwing the track down in front of us while it's happening. But it seems like, as it stands, we could be in a situation in September where that's like, okay, we're kind of off to the races on that. I have one question that I don't expect an answer to, and another one that I don't expect an answer to. So what's the use? I think maybe I'm pushing towards that development session space. So one thing was around, I hadn't considered this, but that we are potentially inviting people who are very passionate about particular issues, who may then face a situation where their passion for that issue or their access of service presents a conflict of interest that prevents them from participating in a conversation or using the very vote that they've just been given through a process, in the same way that everyone has to consider a conflict of interest. So I have a really big question mark over that, and how much we can really confront and consider that, so that it doesn't seem like by the time we get to that point, it's all good. And you could, I worry about process clanging in front of people for that. And I have a second question around our process on sustainable futures and what it would be like for us to reach a set of decisions for those voting members who can vote in, for example, June, and then just a few months later for other people to have a voting right introduced that they will not get to exercise on what could be the biggest and most consequential decisions that the IJB makes. I don't think I have an immediate view for myself on that, but I can just see them right there. I don't think there is answers, and I don't think we're looking to what we're being told by government for those answers. But I think I'm saying those are questions that I have floating around. I don't know if there are answers to them, but maybe the question is, how can we get towards answers? And if we can't, how can we be as transparent as possible about the fact that we've not managed to crack that?
So I am currently sitting on the short life working group that's looking at all of these considerations, and it's really, really complicated. And there are carers reps that sit on that, and providers, third sector, etc. And I'm certainly happy to take those questions back to the next meeting and see what they've thought of, because I think the thing is, they haven't thought of everything. And when we come to these meetings, it's really helpful to have these types of questions, because the conflict of interest is a big one. And I think that we want to make sure that people are best supported, because the transparency, the governance, the responsibility that lies with you as a voting member is quite different. So it's really, really important that everybody is supported and training's in place and they understand their roles and responsibilities. So I'm more than happy to take that back to the next meeting. I don't promise I'll get an answer, but I'll certainly raise it.
Jamie, I think they're really helpful points, and Sarah, thank you for taking them on. I think if I can add my thought on this as well, is actually it puts more emphasis less on our seeing decisions as a yes, no point in time, but actually as a group of people in this room. I don't look round this IJB meeting and think, oh, well, I'll take the voting members' questions first and everyone else needs to wait to the end. You're all entitled, whether voting members or heads of service, to contribute at this point. And all of those contributions are valid and heard and contribute to that decision making that comes. So let's not lose sight of that all these contributions matter now, regardless of if and when voting rights change. So I think holding that really clear is important for us, that it does inform the right thing to do, regardless of who has a voting right. Now, I realise that may come across as a slightly naive approach, but I think it is important that I do listen, and I know all of you do listen to all contributions, and the development sessions, while those are not in public, they're really detailed to educate us around decision making, and they are important to work out the balance of decision making that comes. So I just say that because I don't think we want to see this as a make or break of how we operate as an integration joint board. It's an evolution of our working processes. It shouldn't be seen as a cliff that things are drastically going to change. Your views exist today, they will exist whether you're voting or non-voting in December, regardless of what happens, and those will be taken into account. I absolutely assure you of that. Okay, but there are practicalities that need to be worked through, and the practicalities are very important that everyone's clear on. Okay, I'll stop at that. Right, so I have Jacqueline next. Sorry, Jennifer, then Jacqueline.
Right, that's great, thanks. Thanks for this report, Billy. There's really loads of good information on it. The first thing I would like to do is obviously to congratulate Pauline and Fiona. So I was delighted to see you've got permanent positions there. I was also at the hospital at home. I'm delighted to see how well that's doing, especially considering we were up for criticism when it was first introduced, you know, so delighted to see how well that's running. And my question is around, I think it's number 14, around the app that was launched in, where are we? mycare.scot digital front door. Could you tell me a bit more about that, Billy, and when Renfrewshire would be looking at rolling that out?
Didn't put my mic on. So that's not something that we are locally engaged in yet. David might probably be best placed to answer where we've got to with that and when we engage in that process next.
Yep, sure. There's limited information at the moment, Jennifer, just in terms of when that will roll out nationally. So I think, as the paper says, there's work being done to test it in Lanarkshire at the moment. I do know that NHS GGC are heavily involved in discussions around development of the app at that national level to prepare for when that would happen locally, but we don't have timescales for that at the moment. More broadly, it is very health focused at the moment, the app. Kind of its extension through to primary care and social care is planned, but I think that's over a number of years. So I think it's a long-term process, the development of it.
Jacqueline, bring you in next.
Thank you, Chair. Just a reflection and a comment. It's just to say that we were talking earlier, saying it's a really difficult and quite tense time to be involved in health and social care for various reasons, not least the financial situation that we find ourselves in. But when we get a report like this, it's really positive, and it's just a reminder for us at why we're involved in it, whether it's as a staff member or a representative. So many positive things. And I thought the video with Anne's story, as we said earlier, absolutely underpinned that. So I thank you, and it's great to see you getting around all the services as well, Billy. So thanks for that.
Well summarised, Jacqueline. There's lots of good work happening day to day, and that's a good reminder of it. Thank you. I don't see any other questions for Billy, so we'll move. We're just noting your update this morning, Billy. There's no approval or action coming out of that. That moves us on to item 5, Sarah, the in-year budget monitoring. Thank you.
Okay, I won't go into lots of detail as usual, but just to highlight the main position is it's still an overspend, but it is far better than we had thought at the start of the year. And again, that is because prescribing is moving in a far more positive way than we had thought this time last year when we were setting the budget and looking at all the projections going forward. So that's highlighted throughout the paper, including the reasons for why that is much better than we thought. And I can't actually pronounce the drug name, but I'm sure Stuart will help me out. But on section 5 at the end, there's a table explaining the main movements within the prescribing budget. Part of that's due to an overall reduction in volume growth and price, but the main part of it is DAPA. Just go with DAPA. Right, so that's having a really positive effect on our budget this year. And then if you look at the last part of the paper in section 7 on the reserves, it's just to highlight we have at the moment the projected amount that we think we'll draw down this year. That can change depending on the final year's outturn, and also not just on our own general services, but also in terms of ADP and the PCIP budget. So they will be slightly different come the year end, but it is a far more positive position than we started out with. And that does reflect a lot of work going on in the background to do with vacancy management, but also prescribing. You can't underestimate the impact of that. But when we bring the budget forward in March, obviously, I'll be reflecting all of the different changes and all the recent budget announcements as well. So that will all be built into next year. But it is better. It's still an overspend. It's not a great position to be in. We shouldn't be relying on reserves to help us. But that's the position that we find ourselves in. But so it's good news in one way, but it still is overspent. I don't want us to forget that. Okay, so happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for setting out the paper. I think because we see this paper regularly, this is building up a picture through the year. So it's very much updating the board this morning around that movement through the year, highlighting movements in it. We're only noting the position at this stage. There are no approvals to get. I'll bring. We are noting the position. I always do a little bit of chat because I know people are more likely to stick their hands up if I ramble for a little minute, and it works nearly every time. So I've got Linda, Jamie and Jennifer. So Linda, I'll come to you first.
Thank you. Got a couple of questions. I think for the prescribing, I know that costs are going to go up every year on year due to inflation and things, but I used to work in a pharmacy and I seen the amount of drugs that were wasted every single month, and we don't have that. I know that we don't have a record. We're not recording that. So I think, and that's somewhere that saving could be done, because there's over-prescribing done by doctors, especially within care homes, because the pharmacy that I worked in dealt a lot of care homes, and I threw out thousands and thousands of pounds worth of drugs every month. So I think this is something we need to look at. The other thing is EquipU. I see we get charged every time we're ordering products from EquipU. Are we getting refunds back when these equipment goes back? Because like if someone passes away, they go into a care home. And my last one is about care at home services. I see that through personal experience, we use external companies. For example, when our carers that we have cannot administer medication, so we need to get another company in to do that. And the one that was used for my mum was Caring Hearts. So again, that's going to cost us more money because this is an organisation and a business that they're for profit, when it would not be cheaper to upskill our own staff.
Excellent questions. Thank you. Sarah, do you want to take those or pass on?
I can.
Let's see Stuart.
I'll need to pass on a couple, but I can certainly answer some of them. So there is currently a waste campaign on prescribing, and that's been really successful. It's not just within Renfrewshire, it's GGC wide, in fact it's Scotland wide. And we also have staff within the pharmacotherapy team who work specifically in care homes to work on making sure that the medication is right, not just because of waste, but just to make sure that the medication that people are getting is right. Stuart might want to add a bit to that. No, happy with that? Good. Equip You, the way that the Equip You pricing model works, it assumes that the actual equipment goes back to Equip You, so that's how we keep the costs down. So once somebody has no need for them, once they've been rehabilitated, that equipment is then picked back up by Equip You, and that does help keep the unit costs down. So that's the whole model, the way it works. Obviously, sometimes things fall between the gaps and people have equipment for a bit longer than what you would hope, but that is the basis of the model. But I'll pass the final one about medication prompts over to Lisa because it's very dear to her heart.
Hi, sorry, just on the equipment as well. The staff, the OTs, when they're looking for equipment, they'll constantly look at the restock. So used models, we do that with stair lifts, we do that with all equipment because it goes back, it's clinically cleaned, used, and then it's reissued. And for care homes are expected if somebody needs something particular to their needs that they purchase that. So we won't supply to care homes in and around that as well. So there's a lot of work being done with the OT side of things to make sure that restock is constantly. And medication prompts, sorry, your question around the medication prompts was...
It's just that my mum, she was using the care at home service from Renfrewshire Council. They couldn't administer our medication, so then she had to get an external company in to do that.
We were doing a whole lot of work around care at home, and we'll be bringing that back to IJB and around reablement. So our staff were all regraded recently as part of a job evaluation, which is fantastic for us. There is areas we have to now train and support our staff. Medication administration is very complex. The difference between prompting somebody and administrating, you know, it's then controlled drugs and various things like that. So you go into creams, various aspects. So we have to make sure we've got the right process in and our staff are trained appropriately and we keep that training up. But it is in our pathway for care at home as we start to look at the model of how we provide care at home and how we support people in the community.
Thanks, Linda. I see you nodding there, but I think what I've taken from that, the equipment question, that's business as usual in terms of how that's been addressed. In terms of drug waste and then care at home services, those are both ongoing pieces of work. So I don't think we're where we want to be in either of those. So I think that's something that more questions and hopefully more answers will come over time. Thanks, Linda. Jamie, come to you next.
Thank you. I'm so aware of prescribing just being a constant theme through so much of what we're talking about. I think it's a curiosity around risk and kind of what we do with the fact that there's less spend there than we imagined. So some of my thinking is, when do you decide, okay, we can take a punt and we can start forecasting on the basis that this is how it is, when this is actually quite a volatile thing by the nature of where we are. So how do we get to a position of going, fine, let's forecast the next year on that basis? The other question I have is in what happens as a result of that forecasting, because at the minute, I would assume that money that's saved as a result of that doesn't go back to our shareholders. It's not a profit-making business, so it's not actually a saving. There's this question of like, what do we do with the fact that we budgeted for that and it's not there? My feeling is at the minute, the kind of like more sensible thing would be to be less dependent on reserves then. But actually, I think I have a bit of a question about when do you decide, well, cool, that means we don't have to draw down in reserves as much, or when do you decide, well, that means we have some extra money that we didn't plan on, let's keep drawing down in the reserves and doing some other stuff. So I think it's like a risk question, and it's a question about what we do with the fact that there's unanticipated money that we didn't think would be there.
So there's two, I'll start with the impact of the changes in prescribing on the bottom line. So that change is currently built into our projected position. So that's helping that. That's therefore the impact on the need for us to draw as much reserves is less because of prescribing. So we factor that in. Every 4 weeks, I'm looking at the forecast for prescribing, and prescribing is always 2 months behind because the time it takes to process the prescription, etc., and it hits the ledger. So we're always looking at the data to understand what's that impact on the bottom line. So when I bring the budget in March, that's when the IJB will be presented with what I think we should build in for prescribing for next year, and what element of risk and what level of risk do the IJB feel comfortable with. For example, would you be comfortable going with what I think it is? And this is based on all the information I have to hand, based on the past year. Or do we think, well, actually, that's a huge risk to take, that we think the current trajectory of spend is going to continue in 26, 27. Let's build in a bit of, you know, be a little bit risk averse. So all of that will be played out in the March paper. And it's really up to the IJB to take on board what I think it should be based on the information that I have. But you're right, it's really, prescribing is very peculiar at the moment, I would say, because we've never been in this position where it's gone down so much from what we started off with. I think that's not a safe place to be in for too long. I think it will start building itself up again. I'm hoping that for 26, 27, it will continue with the current position that we're in, but thereafter it's really difficult to project, because obviously it really depends what's going on out with the UK markets. So we're really, really attuned to what happens there and the pricing. And if things come off branded medicines and go to generic, for example, the DAPA one, that price is, notice I'm just using the short part of that name. So all of that is built in. I think I spend so much time on prescribing, and I still don't have all the answers, but nobody does. Everybody is looking at it across Scotland, trying to understand why is it so much better than where we were before. We are in a reasonable position because we invested in prescribing over the past few years. So that's really helped our position this year. But I think when I bring the paper in March, it'll be, are you willing to accept the risk that we continue with the current position, or are you a little bit concerned that that might change? But that we can always adjust the budget mid-year if we feel it's not actually behaving as we thought it would, and that means that you would use more reserves if we still have them. So it's quite a dynamic and reactive budget at the moment. I hopefully that answers. Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Jamie. Jennifer.
Right, thanks. It's really just a comment, Sarah, and it's really just to thank you for giving us the background information regarding prescribing, because I know we speak about it often, we speak at every development session and every meeting. But up until now, really the only way I've been able to get across to somebody is when the generic change comes to the cost of prescribing. So to hear that there's other companies there that are all kind of competing and that's all having an impact on the cost. So it was really good to just have a bit more background information to be able to explain it to other people that are out with the board. So thanks for that, Sarah.
Thanks, Jennifer. Willie, bring you in next.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick question regarding, as you're talking about the risk. I'm wanting to ask, why is it the HSBC or the partnership that have to shoulder the risk alone? I mean, obviously pricing can be volatile whatsoever. I mean, at the end of the day, it was the Scottish Government that set up the IJB boards, so surely the Scottish Government should allow some flexibility in the risk of finance if there's a price increase. Would you not agree with that?
It's a delegated service to us along with every other budget, I'm afraid, Willie, so we have to manage it within the resources that we're allocated. We do raise prescribing with the Scottish Government at regular intervals, as you would imagine, and we do have some influence over how prices and caps and the various different tariffs, we all discuss those with the Scottish Government regularly. We do get an uplift on the prescribing budget, and that's the base uplift. I think it's 2% for 26-27. But it's within the affordable margins of the Scottish Government allocation. So it is our budget to manage, unfortunately, including the volatility of it, which is really frustrating and difficult to manage. And I do share your thoughts on that in some respects, but it is our budget to manage.
Oh, thanks, Willie. It's a a helpful question to raise, actually, because it does emphasise that at different times there are different pressures on aspects of the service that we deliver. Sometimes it's the vast increases in utility prices, which only goes one way, whereas medicines costs are notoriously volatile, and it's part of what we do, unfortunately, in terms of planning. That is hard. Jennifer, your hand's up. Yeah, that's okay. Don't see any other questions online or in the room. So thank you for that, Sarah. We're noting in your position and the projected year-end position for 25-26. Thank you. That takes us to item 6, and just to make sure that paper came separately. So just to make sure that everyone has that paper available, and I'm handing over to David for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So members will note that this is a briefer update than previous Sustainable Futures papers, but it does provide a focus on 3 key areas that I'll go into in a wee bit more detail. So section 4 of the paper provides an update on the voluntary redundancy and voluntary early retirement process, which has been progressing over the last 6 months for council employed staff. As is highlighted in the paper, staff were asked to note their potential interest in VR or VER, and where requested were provided with indicative figures as to what that would mean for them. For those that then wish to proceed, all potential costs have now been calculated, and we've been able to categorise posts into 3 groups. So the first of those is category 1, which is those posts that can be released. Category 2 is those posts that can't be released because they're required to ensure continued service delivery. And category 3 is then those posts which are on hold pending the IJB's decision on those savings previously considered in September last year, but on which no decision was reached. In line with the Council's scheme of delegation, the Chief Exec has now approved the post within category 1 to be released. And so we're in a position where we can inform staff within that category and also those in category 2 of the decision made. At this time, though, we can't confirm the outcome of those posts in category 3, as that will need the IJB's decision in relation to those savings considered back in September. And I'll come on to the timeline for that in a wee moment, as that's captured in section 6. So the IJB is asked to approve the use of £608,000 of general reserves to cover the non-recurring strain on the fund costs that would allow those in category 1 to be implemented. And following on from that, we would then be able to continue to communicate with those staff in that category. Moving on to section 5 of the paper, this then follows on from discussions in November, where the IJB had been asked to rephase some savings within the programme, and it also noted the high risk that the target savings to be achieved from the review of external care at home packages and also packages of care for people with physical disabilities would not be achieved. Since that meeting, our ongoing monitoring has shown that these savings will now not be achieved, as a significant number of the care packages in scope have been reviewed and individuals' assessed needs haven't changed to the degree that would allow a reduction in care packages. And I think that's also reflective of the complexity of the demand that we're managing within the services at the moment. As such, the paper also asks the IJB to approve that the target for these savings is reduced by 2.26 million, which would then reduce the overall savings and income target for phase 3 of Sustainable Futures to be reduced from 14.58 million to 12.32 million to be achieved by the end of 2027-28. Members are also asked to approve the rephasing of a small proportion of contract management savings equivalent to £7,000 to 2026-27, and that's described in section 5.6. So we set out next steps in section 6 of the paper. In SNT, alongside this work, are continuing to review and develop a long list of additional savings, and we will do that alongside the development of the Foundations of Transformation programme, which the IJB will be asked to consider in the next paper. An update on the status of that savings activity and any associated actions proposed will be brought to the IJB in June. Alongside this, we also anticipate that the proposals where no decision was reached in September 2025 will also be submitted for further consideration in June, on the basis that no amendments will be made to the changes proposed, but with the exception of Child Smile, where a revised proposal will be submitted reflecting the views that have been expressed from professional leads. We will, however, continue to review the information included in those proposals related to relevant policies and strategies, and also service data to ensure that IJB members have the most up-to-date service position on which to make their decision. And as a final point, we'll also bring a programme update to the next meeting in March, which will include further details on the potential impact of financial recovery with a supporting integrated impact assessment for members to consider at that meeting. But I'm very happy to take any questions on the paper.
Thank you, David. There's a lot of detail in there. I've got a couple of hands already. I've got Lisa Marie first, then Paul. Lisa Marie.
Thanks, Mags. I'm turning into that person, but it's a comment again. I support the recommendations as set out in the report, but I just wanted to reflect, and I suppose this is looking at our constituent and the people we support's consideration when we're looking at reviewing things. I think there is often an assumption that we will review and people will lose things because we need to make a saving. And I can understand why people think that, because it's a painful process and they will see people who have reductions. But I think what this paper reflects, because we are looking at a reduction in the care packages that is significantly less than what the kind of budgeted amount was, because people's needs have not changed. So we are not taking the saving. And I just think it's important to reflect that when we are looking at these, we're always looking at it with people's needs in mind. And I just wanted to reflect that because the situation is painful for everyone. But what this shows is that officers have people's needs at heart when they're looking at it, and that we won't remove things that people need. And I just think it's important. I actually think it's really a positive thing that we have shown that in this paper. I'm not sure we always show it when we're looking at changing or refreshing services, and I think that's probably a note to take forward for officers when they're writing things. There's some detail here around how it's been looked at really in a holistic way, and I think it's important that that's reflected.
Thanks, Lisa Marie, and I see Jennifer reacting, or an online reaction is the best way for me to capture that in agreement. So thank you for those comments. I don't think you were looking for a response on that, Lisa Marie, so I'll move to Paul. Paul, you're still on mute. We can't hear you.
Hopefully, can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. Right, a couple of questions. I noticed in your paper you're proposing a £608,000 for the voluntary redundancy. I presume that's coming out the reserves, which your reserves situation is quite perilous at the moment. You're also talking about savings deferred for, you're not going to achieve savings of reduced by 2.6 million, 2.26. Your savings are going to be pushed down to further years. How are you going to produce a balanced budget? Because I mean, it seems to me that you've got a lot of pressure on your reserves. A lot of the savings are going to be put down to further years. So are you going to be able to produce a balanced budget? I notice you're going to bring back some of your previous proposals, including, I'm grateful that the child's mind's been looked at again, because I think it's an area to look at, but just the risks were too much last time. I just wonder, in light of all this, it's the timings. It seems, what are you going to bring back in March?
I think Sarah's going to, or both Sarah and Billy were going to jump in.
So that's the difficult question, Paul. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. I still have yet to get the budget offers from both Health and the Council, and once they've been firmed up, I'll be able to finalise the position of that. So over the next few weeks, that's what I'm looking at. How can we actually bring a balanced budget to the IJB? And I think similar to previous years, there will be a need to use reserves to help us in that position. But until I have those figures confirmed by both of our partner bodies, I can't really respond any clearer than that at the moment, I'm afraid.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for that question as well. Yeah, really challenging as you're describing, and David referenced the work that officers are doing at the moment to produce a long list of savings. So some of those savings that we'll be bringing forward will be savings that absolutely make sense in terms of where we're trying to get to over the coming years and that new way of delivering health and care. Some savings might, in the short term, take us a step further away from where we want to be. So we might need to take some tactical decisions about those. If we were to bring forward a balanced budget that means that we don't use any reserves in the way that Sarah's just described, we will have to. we would be bringing forward really significant savings proposals that we know would impact detrimentally in terms of outcomes. So we are not keen to be bringing those forward whilst we've got reserves. So it's that delicate balance between bringing those savings that make sense and get us to where we want to be, and not taking us too far away from in terms of delivering quality in the here and now and keeping us on track to that transformation space. So that's the sort of tricky space that officers are in, and we'll be using some of our workshops over the coming months, and obviously bringing those forward through formal IJBs in due course.
Thanks for that. Thanks for the question, Paul. Willie, bring you next.
Thanks, Chair. It's a bit of a head scratcher, actually. What I don't understand is, across the board, we're short of staff, we're crying out for staff, and everybody's saying they can't provide the services because they don't have the staff to implement that or provide them. And yet here we are talking about redundancies. You know, it's like an oxymoron. You know, we're crying out for staff, but yet we're going to be offering redundancies. Secondly, how many staff are we talking about that covers the £608,000?
Thanks for your question, Willie. So in terms of the numbers, given the numbers involved, I think pending the decision of the IJB today, we wouldn't share those specific numbers in this meeting, but we would be happy to share further detail separately and have that kind of wider discussion. I think in terms of that wider context.
Can we just clarify that that's because it might be identifiable to the individuals, because the numbers, I believe, are quite small. That's the reason it's not done in that way, which is fairly standard HR approach around this. So it's not intended to hold information back from you. It's just it could be identifiable. Sorry, David, I just wanted to clarify that.
In terms of that wider question around why are we looking at voluntary redundancy, well, I think in terms of the financial position that we're in, we need to provide services within the financial envelope that we have available to us. I suppose related to that point that we've just made, it is a relatively small number that are within this category to move forward for voluntary redundancy, and any further decisions would be dependent on specific savings proposals. So it is very much considered within the decisions that we've made around VER, around where there's perhaps additional capacity or whether demand in a particular service area has changed that allows you to change the service model or the staffing model for that. But we are not proposing taking voluntary redundancy or voluntary early retirement in any area where demand is greater than the staffing that we have available.
Does that answer your question, Willie? So the question around visibility of numbers, I think it's probably helpful to flag that was one of the reasons this paper is separate from the others, to make sure that those involved were informed before any papers became public, and we're keen not to make it, and they'll be told after, but because the staff are employed by the council, not the IJB, we have to follow certain order of process around this. The second part around not all individuals have this option open to them if they are working in an area that their role is in demand and that we are either recruiting or those positions are still required. Is that a fair summary?
But it's still not been answered. Across the board, you're short of staff, and yet you have redundancies. Can you not have transference of staff?
So it is, I think you kind of touched on it there in terms of there are different roles across the organisation between health and social care as well. So we can't just transfer staff to any role that's vacant, because staff have a specific skill set and each role will require a specific skill set as well. And HR policies as well do kind of guide what we're able to do in that space. So some services staff may be able to kind of move across, but generally, depending on the skills and the experience and the qualifications that staff have, you need to have a specific member of staff undertaking that role.
So I think the key point I think that will maybe help to answer that as well, this is voluntary. So this is not, we're not mandating this for any member of staff. So I think at that point, it's up to the individual to assess themselves whether their skills are transferable, but they are opting into this process at this point. There's no required redundancy, Willie.
I can understand that it's voluntary, but the very fact that you're offering redundancies when you're short of staff.
I think your point's well made, and I think it is just recognising that not all staff can perform all services and all roles, and that is true of all of our services. Thank you.
Retraining. When you bring in new staff, there'll be an induction process or whatsoever, there'll be training involved.
So Willie, I think these are all valid points and all part of day-to-day management roles of activities that happen across all our services, and you know, part and parcel of managing the services. Thank you.
Yeah, the only reason I'm asking that, because obviously any reduction in staff has an impact on the carers themselves, you know, because obviously it's the service users that are affected within that, and that is the direction that my queries are on that.
Thanks, Willie. No, I appreciate where your question's coming from. Kath, were you wanting to come in? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Absolutely, Willie, I share your concern, and it feels like we make changes in one part of the system, understandably, and it will have an impact elsewhere, and that's tough. And as always, I'm looking at the sequencing of the agenda, and I feel like we're moving towards the Foundations of Transformation agenda item, because all of this is really important, that redesign, doing things differently, isn't just moving the chairs on the deck. It's absolutely fundamental to doing things better for the needs of the population, and focusing quite rightly on the finances and understanding that, but knowing that the finances are there to deliver services to people like Annie that we saw at the beginning. So I am concerned at the loss of experienced staff, and at the same time I understand that the management team are putting forward the best proposals that we can at the moment to allow some of the freeing, because to your point, Willie, it isn't, to my understanding, it's not a linear process. We've got a bank of staff, if I can use that term, but there are skills there that can be used differently as part of that redesign. So it's difficult, but I think necessary at this point. Thank you. Not a question, just a comment. Thank you.
No, that's helpful. Thank you. And I think that flavour and that essence comes through the whole agenda today. So thank you for the questions and for the paper, David. I don't see any other hands up in the room or online. So there are a number of recommendations in this. So we're noting the update provided on the voluntary redundancy and early retirement process, approving the use of reserves to fund those one-off costs. I'll not read it verbatim, it's there. We're approving the revised revision of savings as set out in section 5, and then noting the next steps. So that's at section 2 of the recommendations. Thank you. So those are noted and approved as described. Thank you, David, for that. That takes us on, as Kath just said, to the foundations of transformation. So I'm going to hand over to Frances for this paper. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, this paper sets out the HSCP's plans to establish a Foundations of Transformation programme that will inform our next strategic plan, which is due in March 27. And it recognises that this new strategic plan must provide a roadmap for how locally the IJB will work with communities, staff and other key partners to reform our services as part of that whole system change that we know is required. The paper gives an overview of the 3 national frameworks issued by the Scottish Government and COSLA, and I think that provides a sort of common shared blueprint for public services, but in particular for the health and social care sector. The overall direction and principles within these frameworks isn't new, and many of you that have been working in the services as long as I will, they'll be very familiar. They flow from the 2011 Christie Commission, but they do act as a renewed call for more efficient and integrated public services, prioritising prevention and empowering our staff and our service users. And it is in recognition that the Commission's original ambitions have not been fully realised. The paper, however, importantly notes the strong position that we're in Renfrewshire, and I think that is really important to highlight. That, and it's not just in Renfrewshire, it's across the broader Greater Glasgow and Clyde area, where we have so many excellent examples of integrated and preventative initiatives in place. However, both the HSCP and our partner organisations, we all realise that we need a more fundamental, bold programme to deliver the systematic change that's now needed. The paper details the transformation work being undertaken by our partner organisations, so NHS GGC, Renfrewshire Council and our Community Planning Partnership. And importantly, the collaborative whole system nature of these programmes for the HSCP is a key partner. Section 5 of the paper sets out our own plans for the foundations of a transformation programme that will inform our strategic plan, but also form the basis of a lot of our support and operational plans and strategies. Everything needs to flow from that vision and those principles. And we provide in the paper an overview of the proposed programme work strands, and they are, you'll notice, largely based on the national principles of reform. I won't go through them in detail, but I suppose over the coming year, some of the key things that we're looking to do is develop greater insight about our changing population. And there's two key ways we do that. We need to actually engage more with the people that use our services and work in our services to get that insight. But also we need a focus on building richer data intelligence, and not just with the HSCP, with our partner organisations. We need to work with our partners to ensure that our relationships provide the right foundation for whole system working, that we have governance structures that are fit for purpose, and the way that we plan supports whole system working and the best use of our collective resources and intelligence. We also need to understand more about the prevention and early intervention work that we're currently doing. What's the evidence base for this? And we know that that's a quite challenging area to evidence, you know, while we can get anecdotal stories about the impact and positive outcomes it's delivering. How do we build a business case to actually scale up what we know is working well? And then critically, a challenge that the senior management team are spending time talking about is how we create space to explore how we can be more innovative, make better use of digital, and learn from other areas about how we can do things differently. Alongside this activity, the programme will develop a number of supporting strategies and plans. Firstly, a participation, communication and engagement strategy, and that will look to extend the reach and effectiveness of how we engage and strengthen relationships. We need to review our workforce plan and ensure that we develop and shape our current workforce to deliver new service models and support our workforce through the change. And that is really picking up on the point that Willie's raised about how we support our current staff on that transition to deliver that new model, look at the skills that are required, but also recognise change can be challenging and stressful, and that we need to keep our staff's well-being at the centre of that. And when we talk about workforce plans, in Renfrewshire, we've taken the view that our workforce plan covers the entire resources to deliver the delegated services. So our workforce plan does include consideration of our unpaid carers as a key resource to that, and our commissioned services. And also critical will be the developing our leaders and building the right organisational culture. So we need to look at a programme of work around that, and certainly talking to Billy about actually doing a bit of self-evaluation to really understand our culture to inform that piece of work. So just to conclude, I just want to recognise that this programme will evolve. It needs to be refined as we the collaborative nature of it, that it needs to be informed with ongoing discussions with partners in our wider community to shape our thinking. And because working whole systems really just going to be pivotal to the success of this. So we're going to have to work at the pace with our partners. Furthermore, the senior management team are going to have a really key role balancing the programme's ambitions against the competing demands and the strive to maintain our operational excellence. And I think critically in this is the short-term requirement that we need to maintain a focus on the IJB's financial sustainability. That is our overriding priority. So regular reports will come to this meeting, and I realise it's a quite detailed report with a lot of information in it. So I'm really happy to take questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Frances. I've got Jacqueline, but I'll come to Linda first. Jacqueline, if that's okay. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Just a couple of comments, really. think reading this was really frustrated to see that we're still 15 years, almost 15 years down the line, we're still talking about the Christie report and we've not implemented things from the Christie report. But I'm hoping with our new leadership that this will become reality. And this is something that the Foundations of Transformation programme that I would like to be involved in, coming at letting development of it, and I think we should be utilising the Fairer Renfrewshire panel as well. So any other kind of groups like this we should be using, maybe even the carers reps as well, and get them involved and making sure that lived experience is at that table when we're developing this programme, because it needs to be embedded in it. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Linda. I could see nods around the table. Before I come to others, because I know others have, I mean, when I read it as well, I was like, but what about this and what about that? So that was my feedback. So I think all of these need to be captured. So thank you very much. So Jacqueline, come to you next then, Alan.
Thanks. I share Linda's frustration about the Christie Commission, so good comment. Yeah, I think it's a really ambitious paper, a great paper, and it's inspiring as well. I think sometimes, as I said earlier, we can get bogged down in worrying about the finances and the budget. And I remember talking to you, Billy, and you were saying it's a time to be positive and optimistic. So that's a note to self. So to see a paper like this does give you a wee boost to see that there's a brighter future ahead. And I think, as Frances said, we've always had a prevention and early intervention agenda and worked well with partners like the Council and NHS. But I think this paper really takes it up a notch, and you can feel that throughout the paper. So thank you for that, and it's certainly given me a boost on a January day. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Alan, come to you next. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I would echo the comments that have been made so far, particularly Linda's, in relation to the lived experience panel, and we do have a decent track record in Renfrewshire. I think we've also had conversations with the Chief Officer around the table with third sector reps in relation to the existing engagement approaches that are used by some of the significant players around health in Renfrewshire, and there's also many other networks that we can tap into. So in some respects, this idea of engagement, we have an infrastructure there that works pretty well. And whilst obviously we talked a bit earlier about the sort of risk around voting rights and the potential conflicts of interest, etc., I think that's something we can work through as a sort of process and come up with ways that the networks themselves that are local to us and already in place could also be influences in helping us to shape the services. My point, I suppose, is just to raise is always around this, and Linda's probably heard me say this at lived experience panel sessions, is that we're very good at asking people to speak, you know, but we also need to make sure that they get a chance to decide too, you know. So gathering data from local people is great, but there has to be a sense of how we feed back to them how that helped us decide, or how they themselves influenced those decisions, or in fact through things like the IJB they actually make the decision formally. So it's just to make sure that we're not just, as always, rushing to ask questions and then making sure that we actually go back and show how those questions that were asked changed things. Thank you.
No argument from me there on that, Alan. Thank you. I've got Jamie, then Willie. Oh, sorry. No, apparently Willie was first. I've been corrected. Well, oh, one of you. You're being too polite. Willie, come to you first. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just a quick question, Frances. You commented there about on the strategic planning, with the workforce, etc., for training. But you mentioned there, you were talking about the carers. How much are you factoring in the use for carers as a supplement for staff?
In terms of, I think it's not a replacement where we've got any, so we're working to deliver statutory services. We always would with our existing workforce, so that's different. But I don't think that we can ignore the fact that without carers and the work that they provide, that if nobody provided that unpaid caring role, that there would be a huge additional burden and pressure put on our services. So we recognise the huge value that unpaid carers bring, and recognise that, and it's increasingly hard, given all the things that Willie, for carers to have those roles. We need to have a real focus on what support that we can give carers so that they can continue on the role. So the focus on the workforce plan is about recognising you as involved in the delivery of services, critical to its ongoing delivery, and looking at what we can do to support you in that role. And I realise that is a challenging area for many carers.
Okay, thank you. I was curious to find out how much you're actually dependent on the carers and how much you're actually factoring in, what percentage with regards to whatever the service user needs, and what percentage you're actually relying on the carer as, on basically a subscripted, unpaid worker.
Lisa, did you want to come in on that? Thank you. Thanks, Willie.
Just to clarify, every person's individually assessed along with their support of their family and what the family intends to continue to offer as support. So it's not an automatic, we expect you to do this and we expect you to do that. It's very clearly, what role do you wish to continue to do? And I get a lot of people still feel responsibility and accountability for that. So we try, a lot of our work is actually trying to encourage carers to step away, to have a break, to do, it's okay to accept support. So every individual is assessed separately. The budgets are allocated. They determine how they want to use that budget according to their needs, rather than an actual percentage being put in for workforce or not included in our workforce or my calculations for my workforce or my staffing at all. It's absolutely about support and kind of offering cushions for some, and some who have to step away, taking that full responsibility on, but it's on an individual basis.
That's really helpful, Lisa. And I think that there were, for those who may be online in particular, there was certainly a real recognition in the room around that help often that carers need to step away through guilt, responsibility, pressure, family circumstances we all recognise as complicated. So I think what I'm hearing is that we just want to recognise those pressures, and that resource, I think, is maybe a clunky word for us to use, but it's part of that whole support system that we're trying to recognise. So thank you for the question. Jamie, bring you in now. Sorry for making you wait.
That's okay, thank you. It's a no small task to set up something that's trying to do stuff while at the same time also have a strategic lens on what's happening. And I think when I read through the paper, it's not part of the project that I think is missing, but one of the things that I reflected on afterwards was, to what degree is it possible to have in mind a level of communication of what's happening throughout that, not for the sake of communicating, but for the sake of transparency. I think there is something that's really helpful about not just, and that's not just saying every person has to become a comms professional, because it is actually a thing that's got a skill set to find the kernel of information, take it out to people and help understand what's going on. So I think there's something there for me. It doesn't get in the way of saying this is a good thing, but I'm really interested in, rather than saying, and we will do comms around this, how is it possible to weave throughout this a level of transparency? Because one of the things that I think is in the paper is we expect things to not work as a result of that. or we expect things to go in a different direction than we thought, and to recalibrate around that. And some things say, well, we tried that and that didn't work out, or we tried that, we didn't expect that bit of it would be good, we're going to do more of that. That is a more dynamic, and if I'm a member of staff, probably a bit more of a scary position to be in as well. And you mentioned before that you said that it was in there about the idea of supporting and training staff to be up for taking a bit more of a punt, to sticking their head above the parapet and saying, I think we should try this. Sometimes I think when we do that in rooms like this, we think that's for them out there. We're going to help them to do that. But over here, ultimately, we need to worry about the budgets and statutory obligations. My question is, like, how can the Integration Joint Board support you, officers, staff team, who are also taking risks and taking punts, to be even more bold with that? What would you need in order to not just give them out there permission to do stuff, but have permission here to go even further as well?
A nice, easy question from Jamie there. Do you want to supplement that, Kath? I see you quickly putting your hand up before you respond. Yes, Kath.
So listening to you lay that out, Jamie, my response is I see the seeds of that in here, that this is a really hopeful change of culture and approach that's needed, and it builds on the Audit Scotland reports that are in the Chief Officer's report that are mentioned around the NHS and health and social care, and the importance of looking at the variability of delivery and performance. So what do we do about it? So here we've got a set of, and there's risk in that as well, a set of proposals, but unless we're willing to shift some of the resources, and that's people and money, this will only be a hopeful kind of statement of intention, but we're too busy with our heads down doing the daily basis. So what I see in some of this is that connection with the policy at a national level, releasing staff to go to. I mean, David, you were at the Quality Accelerated event. So getting those ideas, that's part of the training, that's part of the mind shift, to get into the space where risk is something that I'm psychologically safe to do. If I'm uneasy, I can express that. If I've got an idea, I can express it. So culture isn't something over there, it's infused in it. So I see the seeds of some of the response to your question, but that's just my point of view. Over to Francis, thank you.
I think Billy's wanting to come in, but I'll maybe add.
Yeah, thanks. There's been a lot in those responses, and I'm sort of scribbling away frantically. So I may pick up and hopefully thread together a few people's comments if I may. So I suppose the first thing to note, people know that I am optimistic, and we have got a laser focus on shifting what we do, how we do it, involving the public, involving our teams, creating a different culture and a different approach where we're all making a contribution. So, taking Alan's point and Linda's point around the involving those existing networks, absolutely have that in our sights. I think we're going beyond. I think, Alan, you talked about having people involved in decision making. If this is going to work, it's moving beyond involving people in decision making and including them in action. And I think that's what I've just heard Jamie talking about. So what can the IJB, what action can the IJB take in that new culture? So I suppose that was one of my first observations. In terms of then that taking risks, that definitely has been a theme. We had our leadership network event, which is across all of our team leader level, and we had that this week. And I have to say, the team leaders were really positive, really up for it, and we're looking at how we build on that really positive conversation. And they were actually asking for what you've just said. We are looking for permission to take risks, to make mistakes, but to move the system in terms of where we need to get to. And I think that is for us as a senior, well, I say as officers and as IJB members, how do we create that space? Don't have the answer, but I think those are the questions we need to now wrestle with, and no doubt we'll pick up in our development sessions. And then shifting resources. Kath, you talked about shifting resources. For me, it's about shifting resources and power, and it comes back to that first conversation where we're talking about actually bringing people in as part of the change, not actually saying give us your views and then we'll go and get on with that. It's actually about how do we collectively work with communities, work with private providers, third sector teams to actually do that in a very different way. So that's, I suppose, the foundations of improvement. Francis and I really wrestled with this paper. Francis in particular, she obviously did a lot of the work, but this could have been a 100-page document if we weren't careful. So we were really careful to say, these are the foundations at this stage, but we will definitely start to bring some of that further detail through. We are already giving thought to much of what people have asked, but really welcome your thoughts, the public's thoughts, our team's thoughts on how we take this forward together. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that. The energy and enthusiasm is really coming through, and the types of questions. I do think we are moving in a different space at the moment. Stephanie, I see your hand's gone up. Do you want to come in?
Thank you so much for that, Chair. It was just to say, it was just back to Willie's comment about engaging with carers. I think that's absolutely vitally important, Willie, to hear from you in relation to that. And I just obviously, as the rep for social work and social care, want to point out that within the Carers Act, we do have a duty to engage with our carers. We see in my practice experience and my experience of working alongside my colleagues, the expertise that carers and service users bring is hugely important, and working in collaboration with our carers is where we achieve the most positive outcomes. So certainly that's just what I wanted to put forward in terms of, obviously, that it is legislated and carers play a vital role in terms of supporting better outcomes for people. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for that reinforcement there. Thank you for that. Oh, Kath. Final word from Kath before I wrap up this part.
I have a question. So community planning features heavily in the paper, and Linda, you mentioned Christie, and we're still here. Community planning's been around for a long time. Public Health Framework mentions community planning as a key mechanism. What's different this time? Why might community planning? And I realise that's a potentially big question, but what's your sense of it? Why community planning now?
I think I actually feel there's a shift in the conversation and momentum, not just with the community planning executive group, which I sit on, but with the NHSGC, the council, that I think everybody recognises that a fundamental change is required now. Some of that is driven by probably the financial position, but also I think the population needs are changed. There's a greater complexity out there. So I think all partners are at the table looking for answers for their own organisations to have the same resource constraints, and health and wellbeing is actually driving a lot of the pressures and challenges, not just in the health and social care system, but across the board with people, employees, and other areas. So I feel that there is a shift. I think we've had some really good sessions at the most recent meetings with the Community Planning Executive Group. We had NHS Public Health Consultant along to talk about the population health framework, and it was recognised as a core priority for that group. And there is, I think, a renewed sort of recognition that we agreed at the last meeting to go and revisit the substructures underneath the community planning group to look at how those could actually drive forward the work of the group and work more whole system. So I do feel encouraged by that, and in particular, we've already got really good working relationships with the council, NHS, Engage, and One Rain at our leisure, who are all at that group. But I think there's been really positive conversations about some of those other key relationships, and things like Billy's made recently with the university about a strategic agreement with them as well, recognising they can really help with a pipeline of staff, but also development and even new areas that we know that we need to look at, like developing an evidence base for prevention and early intervention. I think the universities could be really powerful in helping us understand and sort of capture the benefits of those types of initiatives. So, so I definitely feel there's a shift, but I don't think we can be complacent. We're working, and Billy's got experience from South Ayrshire, I think, where they've been on that journey, they're further ahead. And I think his input sitting on that group is hugely helpful too, in talking about, from his perspective, the benefits he's seen from a community planning group working differently, working whole system.
Agreed, thanks. That's a
Thank
great
you.
answer. Thank you.
I suspect we could continue for another hour with this conversation. I'm not going to let us because we won't get to the rest of the agenda, but thank you very much for all the questions. I think I'm looking to the team to my right. I think there's a lot in that discussion that we do want to take away, not as formal actions, but taking that essence of what the membership are looking for there, I think is really valuable. So I know you've all been scribbling and I will be following up. So thank you very much. We are being asked to approve that. The questions for me were not disapproval. It was enthusiasm and encouragement and asking for more. So are we content to approve? I see nods and no other hands up. So thank you very much for the paper, and that's approved this morning. That takes us on to item 8, the mid-year performance management report. And back to you, Frances. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're going to hear a lot from me this morning. So this paper provides the mid-year performance update. So it covers the period April to September 25. And as normal, we've provided the full scorecard in the appendix, and that includes a comparison to last year's mid-year position. Overall, our mid-year position shows that the HSCP has sustained its strong overall performance. I think that's really positive, particularly given the challenging operating context. There's been an overall increase in the percentage of green indicators, and that includes 3 new indicators that we added for 25-26, and all of those 3 indicators are all green. In addition, 13 of the green indicators that we've maintained from last year have actually improved their performance over the last 6 months, so we're even improving within those green areas. Overall, there has been pretty minimal movement. We've only had 3 indicators in the full scorecard that have changed their status, so I'll quickly touch on each of those. So one's moved from amber to green, and that's smoking cessation. So that's reducing the number of people smoking through improvement areas, but in our most deprived areas, this indicator relates to. We think that this has been assisted by the commissioning of a fixed term post in Engage, where we've got somebody dedicated to looking at smoking and vaping, a development worker, working with Alan and the team. And also we've been doing some work to look at the timings of some of the smoking cessation sessions that we've got to offer more like twilight sessions and things like that to increase the uptake for these. There is a wee bit of caution around this indicator because while the performance is green and positive, it was at the same period last year, but we didn't manage to meet the target. But we do think, because we've put some further investment in this area, we do feel that we're doing a number of interventions that should put us in a better footing for this year. The rate of pregnancies for those under 16 years of age, that's changed from green to red, but I would note cautions required, because you'll note in the paper the time frame that this is given is quite out of date. That's just a national issue of when that information is available nationally. So it's based on a 3-year rolling average from 2021, so it doesn't reflect the current picture. However, the figure that we have is lower than the Scottish average and also our family comparator group. And the pattern does align with what we saw nationally, with a bit of a dip during the pandemic and then the figures rising. I suppose for the board's reassurance, I think sexual health planning is something that sits within my remit, and I chair the sexual health group locally in Renfrewshire, and we've worked really closely with the Sandyford service. They come to those meetings, and they've been working with us to develop our support and action plan. So I do think it's an area in Renfrewshire that we're giving a lot of focus, and there's a lot of really good work happening. And then the third indicator that's changed, it's moved from amber to red, is the percentage of staff with completed TURAS. However, our latest position from December 2025 shows that we're now actually at 79.2%. So just, and we did touch 80 at one point, but we're just nearing green. So we have recognising that the numbers had dipped. The senior management team and office have committed a lot of time to encouraging these conversations and discussions to take place, and we are seeing an improvement from that. There are 4 other reds in the mid-year scorecard, but 3 of these have actually shown an improvement from the end of year, so we're moving in the right direction with these. 2 relate to our absence, so both for the NHS and the council. So we are actually seeing an improving picture, but there's still, we recognise, a lot to do. And E&E waits less than 4 hours, we have seen an improvement by 2.8%, and there are ongoing initiatives, as members know, around this, that's a continual focus for us. And the 4th remaining indicator is new, and that's around mandatory training for the council that we continue to work on. So that's a new indicator. There is a fairly robust process in place in the NHS side, but we've not had the same monitoring on the council side. So we're doing a lot of work with our managers to sort of establish that the same sort of robust TURAS process they have in the NHS on the council side. So we anticipate that that will steadily improve. So the paper also provides an update on the prescribing variance from the budget. I think we've covered that in enough detail today, so I won't go on that. It also provides an update on unscheduled care performance, and I've always got to highlight our outstanding success around and sustained success around delayed discharges. And we've touched on the report about the role of the whole system reset that we've been involved in, which we've already talked about today. And as Councillor Hughes had asked, we will bring an update on how effective that work has been at a later date. We also have an update on adult social care performance, and as these are new, they don't have targets, but we do monitor them, and we've included some of the information about their trajectory and the activities we're doing around these. I suppose some of the key observation are that we've got an increase in the number of hours for clients receiving personal care and open community placements. And I think that what we see in the figures is pretty consistent with people living longer and people wishing to remain in their home and be cared for there. So I don't think there should be any surprises in the figures that we see there. So really going forward, performance is a continued focus for the SMT. As we've mentioned already, we're really proud of the strong performance that we have in Renfrewshire, and we are looking as far as possible to sustain that in spite of the unprecedented financial and resource challenges that we face. But I think it's also important in terms of performance that we recognise this is an area where that data is going to be critical going forward when we talk about transformation, about informing our approaches, about how we change our services in the longer term. So it's not just about sustaining what we do just now, it's about that rich intelligence to inform business cases and our thinking about redesign. So finally, just to say that the full scorecard, along with an update in the strategic delivery plan, will be brought to the IJB as always in June as part of the annual performance report. So happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Frances. Thanks for that canter through. I've got a few hands up. Lisa Maria was very fast with hers, so I'll come to hers online first and then the hands in the room. Thank you.
Thanks, Mags. First of all, just to recognise, as Frances has, how incredibly positive this is, given the pressures that we're under. We have a workforce who go to work every day to try to keep people well and make their life better. And what this shows is that by and large, we are doing that and doing it well. And I don't think we can underestimate the work that people do every day. And it's often in quite challenging circumstances, and we're still meeting all of those targets. I do have a question. It's more of a broad question. It's not around a particular service. I think the report is really detailed and the scorecard is really good, but I've got a question about target setting, and it's maybe something I should have asked Frances in private, but we're here, so I'm going to ask. So where we obviously have some targets that are set nationally, and they have to be what they have to be, and we should be seeking to meet them. And then we have targets like things around training, which should absolutely be 100%, and I'm pleased to see quite a significant increase there actually in a short amount of time. But we also have targets where we can choose what the targets are. And I am looking at things like sickness absence, which is always a really challenging position and where I know officers do a lot of work. I sit in the non-teaching joint consultative board and council as well, and we get quite a lot of detail around that. So for me, I've got a question around the targets we are setting, because I think targets should be ambitious, but I also think we should be setting targets people can meet. And if I look at the HSCP NHS staff one, absence is sitting around 6.9% if you look across the last year, and we've set a target of 4%. That's almost half. There is a question for me around whether that target should be something like 6% or 5%, so that when we are setting targets for people to meet, they're targets they might actually meet in here. We should always be ambitious, but I think we should be realistic as well. And it's not one I particularly require an answer for, but I suppose it's a wee challenge. If Frances wants to answer, she can. We have the power, I think we should set targets that staff feel good about being able to meet.
Yeah, just to pick up specifically on the absence one, we don't set that. The two partner organisations, because our employees are either employed by the council or the health board, that they set that because it's looked at in the main with all the employees. Setting targets is, and particularly in the current climate, a skill. And previously, we generally look at 3-year averages and look at that when we were setting targets, and then look to have a sustained increase. But things like the pandemic have completely skewed that. So there's real changes. Also, factoring in some of the indicators mask demand. When we look at percentage where we're actually getting a huge amount more demand, so actually sustaining the same level is actually harder than before. So this is where sometimes just presenting figures can mask that. So that's where a huge amount of work goes into setting targets, and why, while I know it can be frustrating that for some of the social care ones where we've tried to bring more meaningful indicators, we've been reluctant to put targets at these when they're new, without that insight and time to actually fully understand, so that we don't actually, I suppose, impact morale by setting something that's wholly unachievable. So yeah, I think your point's really well made. We want to have a stretch, but we don't want to completely disillusion folk by year on year setting a target that we won't achieve. Thanks.
Thanks, Frances. Can I just come back in very briefly, Mags?
Yes, of course.
It's not a further question, it's just a comment. Maybe we just need to we can't actually make them change it, but where possible, have a little word with partners. I've certainly raised it at council. As I said, I sit in the IJB. I don't have any influence in the NHS, but it's maybe worth just saying, is this reasonable? But it is a bit of a dark art. I totally appreciate that, and I appreciate the input.
I think if I'm chair, so I will comment. I think one of the things that struck me in that conversation we need to be clear that while this is a performance report and percentages inevitably become a focus, we don't manage based on percentages, because percentages are really misleading. In a lot of teenage pregnancy, for example, a percentage there would never be a useful metric, but it is reported for consistency across Scotland. So I think just to remind everyone that that isn't how day-to-day management takes place, and I think that's really important. So, so I feel the need to say that. I've got Linda next. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just a couple of things, and obviously it's very frustrating to see the hospital waiting times, but I think we're never going to improve that until we can stop people turning up to the hospital when they don't need to be. But I've got an example of when it's a good example and bad example. It's my friend had got bit by my cat batter, and we phoned up the NHS and we got the out of hours GP service, and they told us, no, you need to approach the A&E, you need to appear at A&E. And I thought, that can't be right, surely we can't just need to turn up to A&E for a cat bite. So then we phoned NHS 24, and within an hour we had a call back and a video call. Somebody looked at our cat bite, said, yeah, it's definitely infected. And then we got a prescription sent down to us to pharmacy, and we went and we got it, and that was it, job was done. And we didn't need to actually go to A&E. So I think we need to make sure that all the services are giving out the right information to the right people at the right time, so that we're not clogging up A&E with people with cat bites. Do you know what I mean? Thank you.
I absolutely. And these examples are so important, Linda, because it's about helping members of the public do the right thing, and the best thing for them, which is not sitting in an A&E waiting room. So yes, particularly those that sit on the health board, we are constantly challenging our processes around this, and transparency with the public. It's not because we don't want people going to A&E, it's because it's not the right place. You know, probably antibiotics or whatever is the right thing, but it's making it easy for people to make those choices. So thank you for raising that, and yes, action needed there. Thank you. Willie, did you have your hand up? Come to you next. Thank you.
Yes, I did, Chair. Thank you. Just a couple of clarifications. I'm looking at, on the maintenance of positive performance, and appreciate that these are indicators. I'm wanting to basically change the narrative a bit. Say, for example, foot ulcers, podiatry, etc. We have the chart here that's in green. For example, 29% of foot ulcers seen within 2 working days. If I change the narrative, that means, 71% weren't seen. On podiatry, 31% of new referrals were seen within 4 weeks. So therefore, 69% were not. So if the narrative was changed, would that be read? And secondly, are these inclusive of children, or is this just figures for adults?
I think there's maybe a wee misunderstanding of that table. Frances, are you able to pick that up?
So the figures relate to, when they relate to children, it is quite clear. Sorry, this percentage. It's because it's done 20. All right, sorry. So it's the number of the indicator is 29 and 30. So that's just the number that we give it as a reference. It's actually the performance is sitting at 91.6%.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for clearing that. But on the second question there, is that for adults or is that for children?
That one's adults. Yep. Yep, it's for adults.
Okay, so is there one for children?
We have a number of indicators relating to children's health, but children's social care sits within the council. It's not delegated to the HSCP, so the social care indicators wouldn't.
So just to be clear, Willie, any children's health service isn't delegated. So if there was a child, particularly this typically relates to diabetes, that would be dealt with within the children's hospital typically, rather than a separate delegated service. This is adults only.
Right, thanks for that. I was asked that question, and I thought it was actually a valid question to ask. You know, if these figures are coming up, they're saying, well, what percentage is my child coming into that? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Willie. I mean, sometimes we do take for granted that people understand what we're reporting, and that's a good reminder that we need to be clear around what service specifically we're covering here and what's delegated through the partnerships and what sits respectively still within core acute services, which would be, if it was a child in that situation, it would be within core acute services.
That's something I can take away to make in brackets. The indicators titles are often set nationally, but I can put in brackets and make it more explicit the age group or who that relates to, because I recognise that that might cause confusion. So yeah, thanks for that feedback, Willie.
Thank you. Right, so, Jamie, you've been waiting patiently. Come to you next.
Thank you, Francis. I think in the report and in your narrative, I really appreciated hearing smoking cessation being referred to. I think some of my learning over the last wee while has been not to forget the impact of smoking, not only on population health as a kind of predictor of where people might end up, but actually when it comes to recovery, how much smoking can impact somebody's chances when it comes to them becoming ill again, how much it. So in some ways we all know that because of the relentless messaging, but in this very specific context, smoking is also incredibly hard to stop doing. So I think just noting that that was in there and that you spoke about it, I really appreciate that. In the spirit of like the foundations of transformation, conversation and being disruptive, one of the things in this context may be different, so I'm up for just being told that's not relevant here actually. But so far I would say my learning is that the culture of like you need to do your TURAS is one that prevails around that measure. And I'm thinking if I'm a member of public watching this, I might say I'm struggling to get my head around what that means. And my understanding is that it's essentially the platform on which people's professional development is held, but it's not the actual why of their professional development. So I think for me, I'm pushing something slightly here, very aware of the national measure stuff and what is ours and what we can change and what we can. But rather than just simply say, well, the TURAS is the measure, I think my curiosity is around how might we take the why of doing your TURAS and make that a more explicit part of what we talk about here, because I'm thinking really the governance route here is to say that's a bad figure, so you need to get out there and tell all those managers to tell everybody that they managed to get their TURAS done, and I think that's really uninteresting and evidently it doesn't work as an approach either. It's not going to get us to 100, but also that's not the spirit of professional development. I think what we want to say to people is we really value your work here. We think you've got an enormous, maybe that is what we're saying anyway. So if it's not, how do we create a culture where that is the case? What you're saying is, no, that is the case. The next question is, how do we create a more interesting governance route for the question of how well are our staff developing and how well are we holding that isn't just a percentage point of how many of them have gone on their computer and filled in a thing.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I'll pass to Billy, but I think one area that we really do need to look at is with the new strategic plan and the strategic direction of the IJB, how we actually get better at reflecting each individual's contribution to that bigger direction and vision and the role that they play. And I think that varies across teams and how connected they maybe feel into the conversations today. And I think we could do more, and then they may feel, I suppose, put more focus on that, recognising it, and it gives us more of a job to do as well, because we need to make sure that they understand the work of the IJB, where we're going, the direction. So I think that's a really valid point and something that we need to pick up.
Kath, did you want to come in, I suspect, on culture at this point?
Thanks, Chair. Just to build on your response there, Francis, absolutely, Jamie. You know, it's your point earlier, Francis, about these are kind of blunt figures, but there's a whole range of measures and actions underneath it. So I have another hat where I'm the Vice Chair of the People Committee of NHS GGC, and looking at the PDPR measure, absolutely. What does that mean? What's a collaborative conversation? What are the barriers to having that conversation? But the quality of the conversation is absolutely fundamental. So from the IJB perspective, ensuring the staff have the time and are able to participate in the culture hackathon, the culture programme, everything that's going on in Renfrewshire Council and NHS GGC is really important and sits underneath that, what feels like a very blunt measure because it's on TURAS. So I absolutely take your point, Jamie, and the quality of it really matters.
Thank you. Do you want to add to that, Billy, to wrap up that point then? I've got
Yeah,
John waiting patiently.
Okay. I promise to be brief, but an area that I'm really passionate about as well, Jamie, and I think a really key question. I think the thing for me is hitting 80% though tells me that our teams take those conversations really seriously. I think it's the first time in 15 years that as a leader I've seen that figure be reached. But I think it is about, as Francis described, how we connect individual people through the team plans, through the service plans to that strategic plan. And your point around transformation, that's how people can see the difference and be acknowledged for the difference that they're making in terms of that strategic direction. So really important. Interestingly, we don't have a similar measure for our council staff, and it's something that we've talked about and will be looking at. And I think Kath's point's a really good one as well. What I'd like us to get to in probably a year or so's time, once we've got that transformation embedded, is an audit of the quality of some of those conversations, because that's the important bit. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thank you. John, bring you in now. Thank you.
Thanks, Mags. I always find discussions on performance where we're talking about human relations and human need to be a really conflicted area for me. And it reminds me of that quote that says that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. Often attributed to Albert Einstein, but apparently it wasn't his quote. It was somebody called William Bruce Cameron, because I just Googled it to get the exact wording right. But I think it's really important that we remember that. And I liked, and I apologize, I had to leave the IJB when the video was being played this morning to take an urgent call. I think it's really important that we show human stories alongside the figures, because the figures don't tell you anything. They also don't tell you how far we miss. So I'll give you an example. I remember once doing a piece of work, and it was in the children's social work world, not social care, Francis, just in terms of language. The social work world, we have a target that said children's panel reports need to be sent to the children's reporter within 20 days of the request being made. And you either hit it or you miss it. And actually, if you want to improve performance, you need to know by how far you're missing it. So when we looked, we discovered that if we improved our performance by 1 day for 40% of reports, we would have been hitting 80% performance. But because we'd missed it by 1 day, we were low. So I think there's a wee bit about that. There is the importance, I think, of human stories, and we need to make sure we bring those and we highlight those, and actually we populate our performance reports with them as well, so that we show that. And then the final bit is, I think we need to think about what it is we're trying to achieve. So there's one figure there about child protection, and it's about whether or not the number of children who are re-registered on the child protection register. It's a number, it's not a target. But actually, what does that tell you? Does that tell you that we are being better at identifying a change in need for that child and that family, and that we've seen that their circumstances have deteriorated, and we've got in early to put them, place the children's names back on the register as a preventative service? So something we need to think about, and that's from the local authority. the interrelationship between what we can directly influence and what other people influence, and I've never quite understood why, and this is a bit of ignorance, I've never asked the question until today, why do we report the waiting times at accident and emergency? We don't deliver the accident and emergency, we don't control the access to it, we don't control how that service operates in the hospital, although we have some role in the hospital, so a question there. And in relation to Billy's right, the council doesn't always publish our targets around mandatory courses, but the council has mandatory courses that all staff are required, and that is reported. I think Jamie hit the nail on the head for me. What we need to think is, what difference does the training make? Is it changing practice? Is it improving practice? And is it meaning that our staff are supported to deliver better care and health services to the population of Renfrewshire? Thanks, Chair.
John, thank you for that excellent summary. What does the performance measure tell us? I think is all of that wrapped up in one question for me. I'm simplifying massively. I suspect there are not many specific responses you need there. And I think the question around the reporting of any wait times we have talked about in development session a few more times, so maybe not one that will, because it's got a longer discussion, but I think the overriding question of what does this mean for us? What does this mean for our services? What does this mean for the improvements that we're trying to make is a theme that's come through all of this. So a really valuable list of questions to be taken away, and none of it's a straightforward answer, I think.
I think the performance paper can't ever be viewed in isolation, and we bring the quality and performance update, clinical performance update, we bring evidence of the inspections, we bring the case studies, and I think that's where reports like the annual performance report, but they do take quite a lot of work and resource to develop, or we would look to ideally bring these more regularly to the IJB, are more helpful, because what they do is bring the performance information, case studies, developments and work that we're doing to deliver the strategic plan, and they pull all that together, and I think you get a better overall feel about, yes, what we're doing performance-wise in terms of national targets, but you get a sense of the quality of that interaction, people's perception of it, because you can have very high targets, but you can go and speak to the public and their perception of those services may not align with green or red. So that is something that we need to be mindful, and we do try and provide narrative, and these reports could become massive, but it is something that we'll keep looking at. And also just to point out about the new strategic plan and that direction, we recognise that alongside that we will need to take a fresh look at performance and the supporting scorecard. We always look every year at the scorecard, but I think there is a need to shift that, and that some of that might require national conversations and discussions with the board as well about that real outcomes focus that we need. So yeah, I think all the points completely I agree with. Thanks.
Thanks, Frances. Thanks for all the questions on that paper. So we're formally approving the mid-year scorecard at this point, but noting that we get the full year one in March. So thank you very much to March, but we get it in June. Apologies. That takes us to item 9. And a note, we've got apologies for people to leave. We're running slightly behind. Half apologise, but it is because of the value of the conversation we're having. So it's all of us that are contributing to that. So I'll not take the blame for our meeting running over, I think is the gist of that. I'm still with you, Frances. Item 9. Thank you.
So this report presents the draft 26-27 Adult Carers Strategy and seeks IJB approval to begin a formal consultation period. That you may recall, the IJB agreed in June 25 that rather than develop a new carer strategy, that we would refresh and extend this strategy to November 27 so that it can align with the new strategic plan. So in developing this draft, the HSCP officers, we've worked with carers, the Carer Centre and the Carers Planning Group, which has a number of carer representatives on it, to review the existing plan, identify refinements to the strategy, and it is really building on extensive engagement that was undertaken to develop the original strategy in 22, both the carer strategy and the strategic plan, where carers were really central to developing those. So the main changes in the strategy at the moment are that we've updated the wording of the priorities, really sort of tested to try and make them more focused and clearer language. We've updated the plan in a page, and that incorporates the new strategic plan themes, some of the new policy and legislation, Scottish Government frameworks. We've updated the demographic information, and we've also included the insights from the Caring Matters Renfrewshire 2025 survey. And we've included a range of case studies that illustrate the support available. So, subject to approval today, we'd begin the consultation on the 5th of February, and it would run till the end of March. We've attached the consultation plan to the report, and it will involve a range of prescribed and non-prescribed consultees. We will look to provide the information in multiple formats, both in person, online, paper, to just try and maximise accessibility and inclusion. But as it's a refresh of the existing strategy, we will be sort of taking quite a proportionate approach to this consultation process. Most of the consultees will receive an email invitation to complete a questionnaire, but we are also planning a number of sort of key focus groups, including groups with the Carer Centre, who will be directly engaged. So following the consultation, we will review the feedback. We'll bring back a report to the IJB, which will detail that feedback and how that has informed the final draft, and that will be in June 26. Just one other thing, the report also notes that the right for breaks for unpaid carers became law under the Care Reform Scotland Act, and it's expected to come in to effect after the election. Now, we were due to review our short breaks service statement and our adult carer eligibility criteria for March this year, but what we're asking the IJB is that if we can delay that slightly, because we are anticipating follow-up information and guidance to be issued from the Scottish Government after the election, and that will allow us to reflect that when we review the short breaks and the eligibility criteria. So it was just to note that. Thank you.
Thanks for that run through, Frances. John, I think your hand is from the previous. Yep. Linda, come to you first. Thank you.
It's just a wee comment, really. I think I love the strategy. I think it looks really good. My only concern is I think there's still a cohort of carers being missed, and I put myself in that category because I got the yearly, the kind of monthly letter from the Carer Centre, but I never really engaged with the Carer Centre because I always just thought, oh no, I can deal with it. I never got paid. I never took any money for when I was caring for mum. It wasn't until mum became gravely ill that I started to get support and actually had to relinquish some of my caring responsibilities. So I think there are a cohort of carers out there that are like, oh no, it's fine, I don't need any support, I'll do it, and they take that burden on themselves. So it's like, how do we reach to those carers?
Yeah, I completely agree, and that is something that we've discussed in the carers planning group a number of times. Some people don't even see themselves as carers. Some people, while the Carer Centre provides an excellent service, and for so many folk, it's a lifeline. It's that type of support's not for everyone. So we do need to make sure that we continue to educate all our staff, our third sector, everyone, so that they know what support's out there, how to direct people to it. We do have a dedicated carers support worker, Alan, who you know in the team, and he actually works with our operational services to go out and update them, train them, and give them support so that they are at the forefront of their mind, thinking about having those conversations with people. And I think sometimes it's about revisiting that, as you say, that initially quite often folks' immediate concerns are solely for the person that they're caring for, particularly if it's a new situation and a new health. But as the caring responsibilities continue, that can take a toll on the individual. So it's about revisiting those conversations and maybe explaining the types of support that's available, which might not be exactly what people think about. They just might think about carers allowance or things like that and feel they don't qualify, rather than some of the other support. So I think it's a really valuable point, and I'll pick it up and have a think about how we strengthen that, and I suppose how we try and get those voices as part of that consultation. But it is an ongoing challenge. Thanks.
Thanks, Linda. I think I'm sure if there were specifics that you want to pick up, not in this public discussion, then I'm sure that offer is there as well. Thank you. Jamie, come to you next. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question about the timings, and it might simply be because we have to do it in that way. I wondered, it feels like circumstances for carers, if we were planning a strategy, the idea that we would have achieved something or moved a needle in 3 years doesn't feel that realistic. So in turn, I can see why adding another couple of years on. What I wondered was, does that give us any pause for thought about the length of time that the next strategy might run for? So maybe we can't do it, but does it seem more, I don't know, I don't want to say realistic because anything's realistic, but does it seem more right to say we probably need a 5-year strategy or a 10-year strategy going forward? 3-year strategies actually cause us more time going out and consulting people and saying, you told us this 2 years ago, is it still exactly the same? It is. It's worse? Okay. So I'm thinking about how that can help actually our engagement processes as well.
Yeah, that's a theme that threads through all our strategies. And I think with the strategic plan, we're thinking 10 years, and similarly with the supporting plans, I think we need to look at that too. So yeah, that's definitely factored into our thinking. And also having those repeated conversations are frustrating, but also not the best use of our resources as well. But we want ongoing conversations and dialogue with carers and with other groups, but not necessarily needing to repeat and produce more strategies. I don't know if that's necessarily is welcomed by those individuals either, to be honest. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Jennifer, come to you next, and then Stephanie.
I was just following on from what Linda was saying. I was wondering, you don't have to actually be in receipt as a registered carer, do you, to be open to the services? Because obviously we've got 19,000 that don't qualify. So we're trying our best, obviously, and you see 77% of that are female. So it just kind of hits home to you, doesn't it? You know, that 19,000 are unpaid carers within Renfrewshire alone, you know. So that's good. So I'm reassured to hear that they're still getting the programmes that are offered to them. And I know the Carer Centre do a fantastic job. I've seen some of the programmes they've got on recently, so well done.
Thanks, Jennifer. Stephanie.
Thank you. I just think it's really positive to see the use of the terminology care partner within this strategy, because again, I think that supports that collaborative approach in terms of carers being key partners in supporting better outcomes for themselves and for their loved ones. So really positive. So thank you very much for this, colleagues.
Thanks, Stephanie. So on this item, I don't see any other hands, just checking. We're noting the detail in that, which is a lot in there, and approving the consultation to commence and the approach that's listed there. Again, I'll not read it verbatim. So we're content to note and approve. Thank you. That takes us to item 10, still with you, Frances, community planning update, our paper for noting.
So this paper presents Renfrewshire's Community Plan Annual Report for 24-25, which was recently approved by Renfrewshire Council's Leadership Board. So some of our elected member colleagues will already be familiar with the paper. The full report's provided as an appendix, and in the cover paper, we've just tried to pull out and highlight the strong contribution that the HSCP is making, and there has been, as I've mentioned previously at these meetings, a real focus about how we work more collaboratively with partners, both partner organisations but third sector, and I hope that you see that evident throughout the examples in the cover paper but throughout the report. So we focus on, there's 3 priority areas in that the Community Planning Partnership have focused on: supporting low-income families, tackling health inequalities, and addressing the climate emergency. So I won't go through it in detail, but you can see around priority 1, low-income families is a real focus, particularly for our health improvement team, where we've had things like Thrive Under 5, where we've worked with active communities and the citizens' advice around income maximisation, food support and referral routes with families in Johnson. We've worked with the Whole Family Wellbeing Service and our colleagues in Children's Services to develop an emergency infant formula pathway, recognising the cost that can give, and trying to make that as stigma-free access as possible. We've got a range of other targeted pilots about the cost of the nursery day, Nourish nurseries, and these are all about trying to reduce avoidable costs and just improve access for people to healthy foods, recognising that there's still a lot of work to do, that they are often the most expensive foods, so a challenge for people. And then we've got the community needs assessment that we've been doing in Gallaghill, and that work started in recognition that that area had the highest levels of child poverty in Renfrewshire. And I think the work that was carried out there by active communities, I think it's really exciting, just taking a very community-led, place-based approach, and I think that'll inform not just I suppose how the community of Gallaghill want to see their area develop, but I think there's a lot of learning from the approach we're taking there that we can take to other areas as well, and think about how sort of cross-sector, how we work with communities differently. So I think that's an exciting piece of work. Around the second priority about tackling health inequalities, members will be fully aware of lots of the work that we're doing in this space, but we've highlighted some of the really good work we're doing with the Fairer Renfrewshire panel, and Linda's probably more equipped to speak about that than me, which has involved STAR project and Engage, and this is looking at the recent health and wellbeing survey and actually testing what those survey findings tell us, how they feel for communities, and actually co-producing an action plan. And we're taking that to the community planning group in the coming months. And some of that work will inform immediate actions that we want to take as partners, but some of it will inform more longer term strategic direction, because there's bigger systematic things like transport that we're not going to be able to put a quick fix on, but it's a really insightful piece of work. And then we've got other initiatives like WIRE, where we've developed an interactive map of all the supports and community-based supports that we've got in Renfrewshire. And that's been a really useful aid for members of the community, but also people like our community link workers, members of staff that are looking for social support and how to sort of direct people to mental health groups, physical activity, and just some of that loneliness and isolation recognition that we want to sort of connect people into things. So it's already had 5,000 views, and we've got 1,300 active users since its launch. And then on the third priority, addressing climate change, well, that's the next paper on the agenda to this meeting. But we are doing a lot of work around how we get people to recognise the links and why climate change is actually really important in relation to sort of food resilience and how it can affect sort of lower income families and communities. So we've been doing a number of food programmes, local growing initiatives, supporting houses around local net zero emissions. So we're hopeful that if we address food insecurity, support healthier diets, build more sustainable local food systems, that actually this will have a twofold benefit, where we're actually benefiting the communities and improving health outcomes, but also it's better for the environment. So looking ahead, as I've mentioned earlier, we've been having really good conversations with the Community Planning Executive Group about the future. As I've mentioned, their plan will be also being reviewed and redeveloped at the same timeline as our strategic plan in March 27. So we've been working with them to look at priorities. The initial priorities for 2026 have been the population health framework and a real focus on addressing the wider determinants of health. And one of the areas that we're pulling out around that is healthy weight and food insecurity. And we're looking to do a piece of work with colleagues across Greater Glasgow and Clyde around that, and really tapping into the public health intelligence and expertise that we have. We're really fortunate to have a public health consultant sitting on the community planning partnership, and as I'd mentioned, we recently had a conversation about the population health framework and how it relates to all the different partners around the table, and it's not something that really just sits with the NHS and the HSCP. So that I think there's a really encouraging conversation that we need to build on. The second priority for the coming year is tackling child poverty. The third is about reducing economic inactivity and improving employability. And then the third is about strengthening community cohesion. And that's looking at a range of things around where we are seeing sort of some communities quite polarised, increasing views. We've seen protests and things happening, but it's also recognising that Renfrewshire, the diversity of our population's changed, and how we look at that. So I think that will be a really interesting piece of work too. So really, the HSCP really welcomed the fact that we'll be looking to work with our community planning partners to develop the plan alongside our strategic plan, so that there is a wider buy-in to the whole health inequalities and population health agenda. I think it will allow a greater alignment to a shared vision for healthier, more preventative systems, but and also critically just allow a sort of more strategic deployment of our collective resources, so that we can look at the role that we can all play, but critically avoid any duplication, recognising the pressures that we all face. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Frances. Thanks very much for that. Jacqueline, come to you first.
I've not asked any questions this morning. I've just been commenting, but same again. I suppose it just demonstrates what we were talking about earlier, about it's up a notch with the partnership working, and this paper perfectly reflects that. And as you know, I'm chair of the Fair and Renfrewshire subcommittee, and I want to put a shout out, as I always do, for the lived experience panel. They absolutely hounded us to have an action plan, and you got your way. And they're so tenacious. I think they're fantastic. And I think it was what you were talking about earlier, Billy, about, it's not just about taking feedback from lived experience. It's about, that decision making and action. And the action plan is there, and there's been a lot of good work put into it. So thanks to everyone who's worked on that. Thanks.
Thanks, Jacqueline. That's really helpful, actually. Saves me summing up. Thank you. Because we're noting the paper today. There's no particular action or approval required for us, but a really valuable paper for us. I don't see. Yeah, Kath, bring you in. Sorry, I didn't see you there.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question. It kind of relates back to the previous conversation, or a couple of conversations ago, where, Billy, you mentioned the university as a strategic partner, and I noticed the mention of West College in the paper, but not colleges per se. And given there's a 10% uplift in the Scottish Government budget to colleges in recognition of their economic pipeline and sporting inequalities, colleges, are they going to be part of the partnership?
Yeah, thanks for that, Kath. Yes, is the very short answer. So essentially, in the conversation with UWS, they were also saying that they're getting into partnership with colleges. And so what we're looking at doing is having a 3-way partnership. So yeah, that's been a very recent development, but well preempted. Thank you.
Thanks, that's really positive to hear, actually. I don't see any other hands or question that, so thank you, Francis, for that. So we note that paper. That takes us to the final item. Still with you, Francis. Goodness.
You'll be pleased to hear that this is the end of my paper. So yeah. So this is the Public Bodies Climate Change Report, and we're asking the IJB to improve the 24-25 report in line with statutory duties, but also to note the HSCP supporting climate change action plan for the coming year. So the full report's found in Appendix 1, and we did submit it within the statutory deadline of the 30th of November, but noted it was subject to IJB approval today. The report summarises our governance arrangements, the progress made over the last reporting year, and how the HSCP contributes to wider net zero commitments through partnership work and health improvement programmes. Locally, our action plan, which is in Appendix 2, sets out how climate and sustainability activity supports prevention and reduces health inequalities. And I think that's a really important point that a lot of people don't understand. So it's recognising that, for example, people on lower incomes are more exposed to climate-related risks like fuel stress, cold homes, poor air quality. So the 26-27 plan focuses on embedding climate considerations in our health improvement planning, improving our own staff awareness between the links of climate, health and poverty, strengthening our partnership, working on net zero, and we do already work really closely with the Council and NHS GGC around this, and then supporting staff wellbeing through sustainable travel options and other ways that they can assist us. The approach aligns with our strategic plan, but also the population health framework, Greater Glasgow and Clyde's climate change and sustainability strategy, and Renfrewshire's net zero council's net zero plan as well. Just a wee point on the template, which is a bit of a challenge, the appendix. The government, we were really pleased, the government consulted us last year with a view to simplifying the reporting and improving the sort of proportionality of for bodies like ourselves that don't have assets. So we were really pleased about that because there are a lot of information that I feel it could be a lot more focused on the role that HSCPs and IJBs can really play in this. Unfortunately, the revised guidance hasn't been issued, so we're working with the current template just now, but hopefully going forward we'll get something a bit more tailored, because we do play a role, because our staff, our council and NHS employees have a role around emission levels, but really most of that monitoring and the buildings and the bulk of it sits with the two partner organisations, so we do contribute and play a role in supporting that, but I think it would be helpful to have a greater focus on where specifically IJB and HSCPs can play a role in this. Our action plan will be progress to our existing governance arrangements with updates to our senior management team, and that will be reflected, the progress of that will be reflected in next year's statutory report to this group. But today we're just looking for you to approve this so we can advise the Scottish Government that it's a final paper. Thank you.
Thanks, Francis. That reflects the discussion that we had around it's not really targeted at an organisation with our structure, but the impacts absolutely affect the population we serve and the services. So I don't see any hands. Yes, I do. Kath, bring you in.
Thanks, Chair. Just to thank Adele, who's in the room today for the paper and for Francis presenting. Just one quick question. I know from other areas that carbon literacy training is something that some staff in health and social care partnerships have undergone. Is that appropriate? Has it happened? Should it be in Renfrewshire?
Adele's nodding, so I have to say I don't know the answer to that, but Adele's nodding, so we can get you a bit more information on that and share it. It's okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Kath. Don't see any other hands, so content to approve the paper that has been submitted. That concludes our agenda today, other than to note that our next meeting is going to be held on the 27th of March in the same format, hybrid. But also just finally, just thank all of you for the contributions today, those who presented, those who contributed either through questions or responses, really valuable discussions. I've taken a lot away from today, and that's quite important for me to say, because I get pre-agenda, I get briefs, I get more detail than most of the other members, but yet I've still taken away lots of notes and thoughts around what we can take forward. So thank you all very much, and enjoy the last day of January. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.